All right, welcome back, everybody, to week 3 of the Transfer Portal Gambling Podcast. I'm joined, like I am every week, with Mike May and Matt Townsend. Say hello, guys.
Howdy.
How we
So,
doing, guys?
doing good, doing good. So this week, week 3, week 1 and 2, off to a pretty hot start. Week 3 is a little bit of a down week, but we'll get to it. We'll cover all the games like always. We'll do our picks. We have 5 picks that we're going to be tracking throughout the year: over, under, favorite, underdog, and our locks of the week. And we'll cover all the games to check out, what to take a look at and keep an eye out for. And then we'll leave you with all of our picks, and then an upset and a parlay, and some additional things that we got going on. But before we get started, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Homefield Apparel. Homefield is a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis, and they're committed to creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. Now, they have a growing collection of over 150 colleges to choose from, including all of your favorite teams, with new teams being added every single week. And if you're new to the Homefield brand, if it's your first time buying from them, if you're a first-time customer, use the promo code PORTAL, PORTAL, to get 15% off your first order. That's promo code PORTAL, PORTAL, to get 15% off your first order. And that link's going to be in our bio. And you can see all of our socials to follow them as well on the right side of me. That's the transferportalcfb.com, at tportalcfb. And you can follow our YouTube page for all of our podcasts and all of our content that we're putting out. Now, diving into week 3, before we get into week 3, because we know it's a little bit of a slow week, we got to take a look back at what we just did in week 2. I got to put my hand up to start the show. I committed probably the biggest mortal sin in gambling, and that is betting the over in the Iowa and Iowa State football game. It was 36.5. I put the over on my first pick of last week, and I should never be forgiven for that.
Technically, it's the second most cardinal sin. The first is taking the over in Army Navy, because that hasn't hit in literally 13 years. But this is just as bad, and that is now 2 weeks in a row so far. Mike had it the first week where someone had it over in an Iowa game, and I'm just wondering when we'll all learn.
I don't know if we're going to learn. And also, it's a little frightening that the Iowa State over is alarmingly close to what the Army Navy over is. I think the Army Navy over was like 32.5 last year. So Iowa State being 36.5 it's frightening. And I think Brian Ferentz is in for a long off season.
The spread in the Iowa game this week is it's something that's never happened in 15 years. There's never been a spread of greater than 4 touchdowns with a total of less than 45 in the last 15 years. And that's what Iowa's done this week.
Yeah, I think Iowa is confusing Vegas immensely. They're obviously confusing me. I think I clearly overthought it, but I think I put way too much stock in the Brian Ferentz contract, and I thought his dad was going to be, letting him do anything he possibly could to score points, because this is their cupcake weeks. They're not going to score a lot against Penn State. They're not going to score a lot against Ohio State. Like, they're just not. So I don't really know what they're thinking in terms of getting him for a total. I think it's a season total of 325. He's got to average 25 points a game. And they have to have 7 wins, which are on pace for, but 25 points a game doesn't seem too promising there. But that aside, we'll move on from that. We'll address some other beats and stuff like that. But I want to jump to covering last week, go over some of our picks, some of our bad beats. I'll start with mine. There's no excuses in gambling, but Michael Pratt, Tulane's quarterback. My pick was Tulane plus 7.5. I had supreme confidence in them and him, but he got ruled out. The line moved a little bit. I still felt pretty confident watching the game. They were up 10 early. They were up 7.5, and then all of a sudden, Ole Miss comes storming back. They're up 10, and late in the fourth quarter, Tulane's trying to start a drive and fumble 6 to lose the game. So they ended up losing by 17. Much closer game than the box score looked, but that was my bad beat personally of the week. But what about you guys? I'll flip it over to you, Matt. Give us a recap of some of your bad beats from last week.
Mine was USC, which got over 67.5, I believe is what I had it at in the show. But I needed so they it was looking great in the first half. It was 49-3 in the first half, but the biggest issue was Ashton Daniels got hurt. So Stanford's backup quarterback was in, which meant USC could just rest all their starters. So Caleb Williams didn't play the second half. And they went on to score 0 points in the third quarter. And then did score 2 touchdowns pretty early in the fourth to give me hope because they were at 66, but no one else scored for the last 5 minutes and it just fell. But injuries led to benchings, which led to no points.
It's also impossible when you're above 50 points the first half to not feel confident about that. Yeah. What about you, Mike?
So mine was the opposite. I had an under 58.5, I believe it was, for the UNC App State game. There was like next to no scoring in the first 2 quarters. I was feeling super good. There might have been 20 points at halftime. Felt really good at the beginning of the fourth quarter, but then they started trading blows. It was tied 24-24, no, 27-27. And UNC drove down, 2 seconds left on the clock, 35-yard field goal. And I don't know if it was blocked because I'm watching on my phone or if they just missed it. But they were not able to convert that, went to double overtime and put 20 more points on the board.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was blocked or something. I remember seeing that, but I think actually no, it wasn't blocked. I think they iced the kicker, but he ended up missing the first kick that got iced and then the actual kick. I think he just missed both. It was such a brutal way for them to go into overtime. Oh my god. But yeah, so definitely a lot of ups and downs last weekend. Some pretty good games though. I do have to give a call out. I had a really good day on Saturday. Texas stomped Alabama. The game was pretty close for a little bit, but I mean, Jalen Milroe didn't really have it going on. He had one fantastic pass, but most of the time he looked pretty spooked. He ran around a good bit, but throwing 2 back-breaking interceptions. And Texas looked fantastic. Quinn Ewers looked like he's going to New York. I mean, receivers were catching everything. It was everything I wanted to see. Playing tough, playing hard. The defense played pretty well. And I mean, I think AP's got them at 4. Texas has now the road clear ahead of them to get to the playoff, and it'll probably be a top 2 seed in the playoff if they continue on the path that they're on. So Texas is back. Proud to say it, but we got Wyoming this week. We'll see how they do with Wyoming.
The upset-minded Wyoming Cowboys.
The upset minded. I think it's like 34 and a half points or something too. So yeah, the upset minded Wyoming Cowboys. And spoiler alert, I will not be touching the total or that spread. I'm just gonna leave it be, ride the wave, and keep going. But moving on to this week though, about some of our games. There's no technical ranked matchups this week. It's a little bit of an ugly slate. I know we kind of addressed it at the top, but there's still some good games to take a look at. I have a couple written down, and then I'll let you guys whatever ones you want to talk about or take a look at. But Georgia's hosting South Carolina. Pretty good battle. I mean Georgia's favored by almost 28, but everyone wants to see Spencer Rattler against a good defense. He's looked really, really good to start the year. Tennessee at Florida, that's probably the closest thing we're getting to a ranked game, mostly just because of the names. But that's a less than touchdown spread. I think it's 6.5 in Florida at the Swamp. And then LSU and Mississippi State, obviously, big matchup SEC wise, but people just want to see, is LSU for real, and Mississippi State, people are starting to pick them as a frisky upset. But other than that, do you guys have your eyes on any other games this week? I'll start with you, Mike.
Yeah, 2 I definitely have my eyes on. One, because I think it's going to be a good game, the backyard brawl between Pitt and West Virginia. That atmosphere is always awesome. So I'm watching it for the atmosphere. I also think you seeing him in person and me, I watched that game twice. The West Virginia Penn State game. That quarterback Green is really, really good. I think he's going to surprise some people this year. And then one not so much because I think it's going to be a good game, but I'm very, very interested to see how Michigan State comes out after the news this week with Mel Tucker. So are they going to play inspired for their coaches? Because all those coaches are going to be coaching for their next job. Or are they going to lay flat and let Michael Penix tear them apart? So it'll be interesting to watch that one.
Yeah, I mean they've looked good so far. Obviously, big news about Mel Tucker and him being let go and stuff. But I I have a spoiler that's they might be involved in my parlay, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, that's the biggest actual coaching news since the Pat Fitzgerald stuff dropped. But what about you, Matt? What do you got your eye on this week?
Not much. It's an ugly slate, but Kansas State Missouri should be a good game. I think Missouri's like they have a very tough defense, so if they can hold Kansas State down, maybe they can sneak a little upset in there. But other than that, it's a pretty rough slate. Lot of 30-point spreads. It looks like we're in week 1 again.
Yeah, it's so weird. It looks like we're week 1, and then there's a bunch of like actual conference matchups going on. But I think I went back and forth like 3 different picks I liked in that Kansas State Missouri game. Uh, and yeah, it's some of these are just absolutely impossible to pin down what you could really like about it. But yeah, covering back where we were for week 2. We put out our picks. By the time this comes out, our updated graphic with our pick results will be out, and not too good for you and me, Matt. To review last week, I finished the week 2 and 3 along with Matt and Mike, finishing 5-0 in your picks. So pretty solid week in review.
From 1-4 to 5-0.
Yeah, there we go. Hot and cold.
Yeah, from the basement to the roof right there. But also, probably my story is I've missed both of my locks, and both of you have hit both of your locks. So
I've hit both my locks. I've hit both my locks, both my parlays, and then I hit my upset last week with Texas.
So you got you're at least plus money, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I hit my upset with Miami, but yeah. Texas was a huge upset though. +7 is and they won by 10. Go ahead, Matt.
I was just say yeah, they were +230.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, awesome cover there. I think Vegas is starting to pick up a little bit on some spreads though. I had my eye on like Notre Dame last week. Obviously that was your lock, that was my pick, and they were 7.5. They ended up covering by like 20 points or 15 points or something. But I think they're almost 5 touchdown spread this week. So starting to get a little more slim pickings on some easier picks, I should say. But to go over our standings, like Matt said, Mike went from 1-4 to 5-0 last week. So currently in first place with a 6-4 record. Both of your locks hit. Mike, second place is Matt with a 4-6 record, also with both of your locks. That's our tiebreaker because I'm in third place with a 4-6 record and 0-2 on my locks. So yeah, how you guys feeling about the start? Do you normally start this hot and cold, or is you normally start the season a little better than this, Matt?
Well, I do when I actually gamble. I do a lot of parlays. So me hitting all my parlays makes sense, and then missing like random picks, that makes a lot of sense in my history.
I feel like I'm the opposite. I normally I should say do fairly well early season when Vegas doesn't fully nail down who they think is good and who's not, and I get really cocky on parlays and I just miss all of them. So what about you, Mike?
I feel like I normally struggle in the beginning of the season, and I don't do a ton of parlays. Funny story for Saturday, I do a parlay with all my picks. I put like $1 or $2 on it each time, just so I could track my picks each time. And I had a $2 parlay for 14 games, and I won the first 8, and it was going to be like a $15,000 payout. So I'm sitting there with my wife. I'm like, do I start hedging some of these? Like, it got interesting there, but Boise State, that money line was the first thing that knocked me out, and the App State UNC quickly followed. So crushed my dreams a little bit there.
Yeah, and then when it's like 8 out of the 15, it's always like the cash out option is like, oh, do you want $15? And you're like, no.
Yeah, exactly. No, I want 15,000. Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. But yeah, no, that's that's a good way to like look at it, because you could also just like see the red and green like as you go down, and when you see like eight green in a row, you're like, all right, I'm having a pretty good day. But the other thing I used to do with parlays is I would pick some of my harder, if I do more than like, 4 picks in a single parlay, I'll do a couple of the harder, choices or harder games, mostly spread in the morning or the noon games, and then start to pick like easier ones as we go along, because then I could look at the end and be like, well, USC just has to win. They don't even have to cover, and this is an automatic win of my parlay. So, but yeah, so moving on though, week 3. We know it's a little bit of a slow week, but we're still going to give you all of our picks, 5 picks, and then we're going to pick a true upset and then parlay or teaser of the week. So, like always, we're going to start with our over. I'm going to let Matt start here. Matt, who do you got your eye on for the over?
I have the North Texas and Louisiana Tech game. These are two really bad defenses. And the offenses they're not great by any stretch, but they're solid offenses. They're kind of middle of the pack in the FBS. But the defenses are both outside of the top 100 in terms of like just expected points per game. So I'm counting on it being a shootout here. I've seen this projected at like 35-35, like a high scoring shootout, kind of Big 12 old style game. So I think that they should be able to push up past 63.5 here.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I'm really surprised at North Texas offense. They've looked better than I thought they would to start the year. But what about you, Mike? Who do you got for the over?
I got Washington at Michigan State over 55.5. I know I talked about it a little earlier. It'd be interesting to see what happens here. The Washington is going to score a bunch of points. Michigan State hasn't really played anybody yet. They haven't given up a ton of points, but Washington has given up points. They gave up 19 to Boise State, which their offense isn't too great. And Michigan State gave up 14 to Richmond, which no business giving up 14 to Richmond. So they both scored 40 and averaging about 40 points a game. So I think this 55.5 is very, very doable. I see it somewhere in the 50 to 30 range. So I think way over.
Yeah, no, I actually like that a lot. I think this is a game where Michael Penix like shows out. I think everyone obviously preseason was super hyped on him. Everything, all the distractions going on with Michigan State. I think he has a chance to like explode this game, put up, like you said, like 40, 50 points and kind of cruise to that over. My pick for the over is a game we just kind of mentioned real quick, but Kansas State, Missouri. I think both of these offenses looked a little bit better than what I thought they would be. And I think both these teams struggle a little bit on defense. So I think it's going to be a little bit ugly to start the game. It's at Missouri, but I think it's going to pick up pretty quickly. And I could see them, the over-under is 48. I could see this going, upwards close to 60. I think this is going to be, a 30 to like, or 35 to like 28 game, something like that. So I could see a bunch of points being scored here. So my over, Kansas State and Missouri, over 48. But moving on to the under, I'll start with mine. I guess I learned my lesson last week because my under is Iowa State and Ohio. I went back and forth with a couple of different picks here. This has got to be one of the ugliest unders on the board. It's at 42.5 points. It's at Ohio. I could actually see this game being under 20. Like, this is just a disgusting game. So both these teams, very, very bottom of the barrel. I don't think they're going to have anything doing on offense. I think they're going to be running the ball basically nonstop. And with the running clock, I think it's going to burn all the way down. So I think it's going to be at most 17-10 game. But Iowa State, Ohio, under 42.5. What do you got, Mike?
I got Northwestern at Duke under 48.5. I think this has a very similar making to the Duke Clemson game. So Northwestern's offense isn't good. They put up 3 or 7 points or whatever it was on Rutgers. They scored a little bit last week. I think they played UTEP.
I think they scored like 28 or something.
Yeah. But Duke has allowed 7 points to Clemson, 7 points to Lafayette. Lafayette, obviously, a D1 AA school up near me in Lehigh, Pennsylvania, but they got some gadgets and stuff like that. So not surprised that they scored, but that Duke's defense is, I think this is going to be a 24-10 or a 31-10 game, something like that. So I'm comfortable way under 48.5.
I love that. My only thought is that Riley Leonard might put up 48 himself.
The
What do
one
you
thing
think, Matt?
I like that. The one thing that scares me about the Iowa State pick is I think Curtis Rourke is back for this game, but
Oh, okay.
so if he's back and they can throw the ball, that does scare me on 42.5. But Iowa State's just miserable, so they might just not score at all. So it's definitely possible. It is not the ugliest under on the board. There is one under 40 this week. I will not be taking it, but that is out there.
Oh my
I
God.
I'll be taking a BYU at Arkansas. A big reason for this is Raheem Rocket Sanders is out this week, supposedly. So if he's out, I don't see Arkansas scoring that much at all. And then BYU's just kind of a physical team that they want to run the ball, they want to play good defense. That's kind of their motto. So under 51.5 seems very doable, especially if Rocket Sanders is out. I think this probably goes under 45.
Yeah, I could see that. I just think Arkansas is just, BYU likes to be physical. Arkansas likes to, run down the throat. KJ Jefferson might just do it himself and just run for every single first down. So, but all right. And so let's move over. So we got our overs, we got our unders. Let's go to our favorites. Matt, I'll swing it right back to you to start. Who do you got laying points this week?
So we talked about how Cardinal Sins are betting Iowa over. So instead, I'll be taking Iowa spread. uh So it's 28 points. So Iowa has to not only put up over 25, they have to win by 28 points. But luckily, I think they can do it. Western Michigan is a miserable offensive team that they shouldn't score the ball at all. So Iowa's gonna have the ball a lot. And I just need like 5 touchdowns. It's really not asking that much. They're the substantially better team. They're way behind on their race to 325. So I don't know. I just think Western Michigan's a bad enough team that Iowa's going to have the ball. They're going to turn the ball over inside their own territory multiple times, and Iowa's going to have short fields. And I think they should be able to cover 4 touchdowns.
I don't know. If you have to learn this lesson the hard way, we'll see, because I think combined they might have gotten like 6 touchdowns all year so far. Like I think both of their games they've been under 25, right? So, well,
They've had 5 touchdowns this year. I just need that in one game.
You need that in one game. You need Cade McNamara to get that in one single game.
I mean, Western Michigan let up 48 to Syracuse last week.
That's fair. No, that is fair. I think getting burned and trying to bank on the Brian Friends contract.
Everyone gets one Iowa bet in the first 3 weeks, and then we can all stop. We just got to get it out of the system, and we're good.
Yeah, it's like this is like our out of conference. We all just have to get Iowa out of the system. Our cupcake over bets for Iowa or Iowa State. All right, Mike, who do you got laying points this week? Who's your favorite?
Before I go to my favorite, Matt, what was the over under in that Iowa game?
43.5 with a 28-point spread.
That's insane.
That's insane. It's so funny.
That is. I honestly, with the way you're talking, I might buy some points both ways and do one of those same game parlays and buy some on the under, but and put that spread down a little bit, because Iowa's not a bad football team. They're just a bad offense. All right, my yeah, right. My favorite is I'm buying into Prime. So minus 23.5 Colorado versus Colorado State. Couple things here. So like Colorado State's really bad. They gave up. They only played once so far, and I think it was Washington State. They gave up 50 or something like that. It was a lot. Colorado has shown that they can win in a shootout like they did against TCU, and they've shown that they can play ugly for a half or so, like they did against Nebraska before pulling away. I just think they're gonna, forgive my French, but curb stomp Colorado State. I think this is gonna be a dog walking, like 49-3 or something like that.
Yeah, I like this pick mostly because like Shador Sanders, excuse me, doesn't turn the ball over. I think it's been like 90 attempts without an interception so far this season. But the best tweet I saw about Colorado though was they basically just play to their competition, and like week 1 they were a Pac-12 school just throwing the ball over the field, and then week 2 they became a Big Ten West school for the first half and just couldn't really do anything. So we'll see how they end up, but. I do like this pick because Colorado State's kind of miserable, but they're going to come out super fired up, and everyone's going to be taking their biggest shots from here on out at prime. So we'll see. But 23.5, we'll see. I think that might cover. But my favorite giving points. I'm going back to the well. I'm going back to Tulane. I do believe in Tulane. I think last week wasn't really an indictment on them. It was kind of a little bit of a mix of some freak stuff happening, and they're a much better football team, and they're also playing a much worse football team than Ole Miss this week. They're playing Southern Mississippi, and Southern Miss got blown out by Florida last week. I think by like 40 points or something, and they only put up 7. And the fact that Tulane could hang with Ole Miss last week and actually looked really good. They looked super fast on the field. Were actually able to score against them. I think they're going to put up like 35 plus points on Southern Miss, and they're just not going to be able to keep up. So my favorite, Tulane minus 12.5 at Southern Miss. So let's move on to some underdogs teams getting points. I'll start with you, Mike. Who do you got getting points this week that you like?
I got Joe Mo at Akron. Akron
You're a
plus
believer,
26
man.
seconds. He's covered 2 games in a row. So good, good teams win, great teams cover. He does neither in terms of winning, but they've covered both. So I'm gonna go back to Kentucky scored 28 against Eastern Kentucky, 44 against Ball State. Akron's been pretty consistent in the mid-20s. I just love this pick. I was very, very close to making this my lock.
Yeah, I just think
that's
26 points is too many for a Kentucky team that's not a great offense.
Yeah, I don't think Kentucky covered. I think they're 0-2 on spreads this so far as well. But yeah, I forget who's the quarterback that moved over to Kentucky. Is it
Devin Leary?
Yeah. I think he's hasn't looked amazing either, which is a little concerning for Kentucky because I think they were super excited when he came over. But I do love this pick. Plus 26 is a lot. I was debating making this my underdog, but I ended up going back to one of my old gambling tropes, big name coaches at small schools, Georgia Southern. So Clay Helton going to Wisconsin. So a tough road game going to Wisconsin, but he's getting 19.5 points. I have been supremely underwhelmed with Wisconsin so far. They lost to Washington State. I thought their offense would click more than it has. Their defense hasn't been as dominant as I thought it would be. So I originally picked them to win the Big Ten West and lose to whoever's going to the playoff from the Big Ten East. But I haven't loved what I've seen out of Wisconsin so far. I think Luke Fickell needs a little bit more time, and I think Georgia Southern's going to be just frisky enough to stay in this, mostly for a half. Let's be real, and then probably lose by double digits. But I think 19.5 is enough for him to cover. What do you think, Matt?
They lost
last week.
Washington State.
They
lost to them. Southern?
Georgia Southern. They hung with somebody last week.
Yeah, I think I forgot who they played last week. I don't have it right in front of me, but I remember debating taking them, and we talked about it on the show last week because I was like, oh yeah, Clay Helton's there. Like, he's going to try and put up a bunch of points to try and get another job. And sure enough, that's all he's going to try and do is just show up in a big game, get at least a headline that he played with a big team, and then try and jump ship in a year or two.
They put 49 on UAB last week.
I mean, I don't think they win this game, but if they could score, the Wisconsin's still not really solid on defense. So if they could score, 14 points, I think they'll cover.
Agreed. They scored 34 and 49. I'm tailing that pick. They scored 34 and 49.
Look at that. Maybe I'll go positive this week.
Wisconsin's been wholly unimpressive, losing to Wazoo last week, obviously, and then Buffalo was leading in the second half in that game before Wisconsin pulled away late, but they just have not looked clicking at all this week. I went with Mississippi State at home, going plus 9.5 over LSU. This was one in our upset special. This is one of my picks. I think Mississippi State can win this game. LSU is just really inconsistent as a team with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. I just don't know Mississippi State's a good enough defense. This reminds me a lot of when I talked about last week with Mississippi State and Arizona. They didn't end up hitting because the spread, they went to OT, but they just took advantage of his inconsistencies. They got 3 picks on him. I think they can do the same kind of thing to Jaden Daniels, make him make mistakes with the football, throwing the football. and they can take advantage of short fields. So 9.5. They just have to stay within a touchdown. I think they can do that.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think they could do that. Go ahead, Mike.
if they make him one dimensional, LSU is not a good football team if Jaden Daniels can't run the football.
Yeah, I like this pick a lot. I was thinking about this as like an aggressive upset to pick, but I liked my Georgia Southern pick more for this underdog pick. But I do love this pick. I also like playing at Mississippi State just is awful. Like that building is insane with the cowbells. I remember I forget who they played last week, but I had the I put on the stream on like my laptop and I had it on low, and I just heard it sounded like a buzzing, and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird that they have like this really really bad quality of this stream, and all of a sudden I realized it's just it's the cowbell is just like the entire fan base. As soon as they're on defense, everyone's just ringing the cowbell, and I was like, oh my god, this has to be the absolute worst place to play as like an opposing quarterback trying to like talk to your players. Oh man, but all right, so we got our 4 picks, covered everything. Our locks of the week. Now, I'm 0-2 for my locks. You guys are 2-0. I don't really know, I don't know really if I should be changing what I'm doing in terms of like what I was thinking for my locks like the last 2 weeks. I overthought it a little bit. I think I'm just gonna go with something I'm very confident in, and that's James Franklin and scoring a lot of points. So I have my lock of the week: Penn State at Illinois over 48.5. Before I saw what the over under was, I saw that Penn State was favored by 14 or over 48.5. I saw that Penn State was favored by 14.5. I do think they cover that. And in my head, I was like, okay, that means this over under is going to be in the mid 50s. And when I saw it 48, I had to make it lock of the week because I think James Franklin's going to try and show out. Illinois is supposed to have a really good defense. I don't think their defense has been as good as advertised. They put up some points, but I think their defensive line is really their strength, and Penn State's offensive line is absolutely their strength. So I think they're just going to try and shove the ball down Illinois' throat and let Drew Largo go nuclear, trying to score points. So I can see this covering, fairly easily. I'm hoping I'm right about the overestimation of Illinois' defense, but we'll see. If Illinois could put up some points on the board, I think this covers fairly easily. What do you think, Mike?
I think. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you got it, Matt. You got it.
I think Illinois' defense is still really overrated from how good they were last year. They were exceptional last year, but they lost a ton of talent to the NFL. And like Derzon Newton on the D line is really good, but I think that defense in general is just still overrated right now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I wholeheartly agree. So the Bielema took a couple shots at Penn State this week too, and James Franklin referenced the 9 overtime game from a couple of years ago too. I think there's a lot of members of the team that were on that 2021 team, so I think they're out for blood with this one. And the only concern I have is will Illinois score enough points? They beat Toledo 28-27 or something like that. But I think their secondary obviously is not as good with Witherspoon gone and everything. They do have a couple good D linemen, but Penn State's offensive line is very, very good. So I think that'll kind of neutralize that. But I like that pick.
Yeah, I think this is going to be like the Remember the Titans, like run it up, leave no doubt, and this is going to be like James Franklin's statement to the Big Ten. But yeah, what do you got for your pick for lock of the week, Mike?
I got the backyard brawl. I got West Virginia over Pitt. The real reason behind this is the home field advantage. So I watched that Pitt Cincinnati game last week. Pitt actually clawed back in. It was 28-7 or something like that, third quarter, and they were able to get back on the board. It lost 28-20, I think it was. But seeing that green West Virginia quarterback, he's very, very similar to that Cincinnati quarterback from last week. Can run, can throw. Smaller, but you can tell he's got a baseball background. He slings it. He doesn't make any mistakes. So that was how Pitt got back in the game, from Cincinnati making a couple mistakes. I think with the 3 safety overlook that West Virginia plays, Djokovic is going to have a long night.
Yeah, love that pick.
Yeah, I think Pitt's rough this year. They're missing Abanikanda a lot. He was basically their entire offense last year, and it just hasn't looked the same without him there. I went with an under in what I think should be a really ugly game. This was almost my upset pick with South Alabama at Oklahoma State, but it would have been my upset pick had South Alabama not been so underwhelming to start the year. And part of that underwhelming is why I'm going with the under here. Their offense hasn't been great. Carter Bradley's thrown 3 picks already, I think, and they haven't run the ball exceptionally well. And then Oklahoma State's been really unimpressive in general on offense. That they put up like 25 and 23 going into like an FCS school and a lower division group of 5 school. So I just don't think they're going to score that many points this game. So I think this is going to be in the low 40s, maybe even the 30s before it gets to 48.5.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a stinker too. I remember we did the Big 12 preview podcast, and we just didn't know what to make of Oklahoma State because we just didn't know what they were doing. And normally I don't really question Mike Gundy and putting up points, but my goodness, they have not looked too good so far. But I could see this being in the 30s.
Turns out a 3 quarterback system is not a good thing.
If you have 2, you have none. So what does that make 3? What, you got like a -1 quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's not a great look.
All right, so let's move on to, so we got our 5 picks. Those are going to be the ones that we track, and obviously keep the locks for our tiebreakers. But where the real money's made are upsets and our parlays and teasers. Let's move on to our upsets. Matt, I'm going to jump right back to you to start with. Who do you got? Like a plus 130 and up. Who you got for your upset of the week?
So when I looked, JMU was plus 3.5 and plus 140 against Troy, and I just couldn't believe that. JMU's like they're not going to play in the Sun Belt Championship. That's only because they're not allowed to. The last 2 years they've been the best team in the Sun Belt, and I think they still are. And Troy, I mean, Troy's a good team. Troy is one of the contenders to be in the championship in the Sun Belt, but as soon as I think next year JMU's allowed to actually play in that game, they're going to run the Sun Belt for the next couple of years. That's a really good football team, and I couldn't believe they were underdogs in this game.
Yeah, I was actually shocked when I saw this line. I almost made this my underdog pick just because when I saw, I think it was, what'd you say, like 2.5 or 3 or something. But I saw this and just assumed that they were favored. So I was kind of shocked at this. I had to look into Troy a little bit, but I love this pick. I think JMU is a pretty good football team, and they're also just pretty pissed off that they're not bowl eligible yet. But my true upset of the week is I'm going back to a pick I had before. So I had the over in this game as well. I'm taking Missouri plus 160 against Kansas State. I think that this is going to be, I won't call it a shootout. I don't think it's actually going to be a shootout, but like I said, I think it's going to be in the mid 50s, but I just think Missouri is going to make less mistakes. I don't really trust or love Will Howard on Kansas State. I thought I was going to be backing him. I had him, being one of the top people in the Big 12 in our preview. He hasn't looked amazing, but Kansas State, they don't necessarily make too many mistakes, so they're going to score as well, which is why I think the over is going to hit. But I think Missouri, I think they deserve a little bit more shine than what they've been getting, and I think they're going to break out a little bit and be able to pull this upset. I think the line's 5 points, but so it's a pretty close game in terms of points. But plus 160 is pretty good value for me. So going with Missouri. What do you got, Mike?
I got Florida plus 200 against Tennessee. So I don't think Florida is going to win, but they can win. Tennessee hasn't really played anybody yet. Florida's got a bunch of dudes who just haven't put it together. They're coming off another warm up game after they got beat down pretty good by Utah, and I think they're reeling. So I don't, Bill Napier, he doesn't want his seat to get any sort of warmer than it already is. I think that point spread is close for a reason. And it's at the Swamp, so I think they have a chance.
Yeah, Billy's essentially coaching for his job for the rest of the year now. So I think he wants to have one marquee win. And I think I saw a stat sometime earlier this week. Like at the Swamp, Tennessee hasn't won since 2003, I believe it is. So they've beaten Florida twice since then, but both have been home games. So Florida should have like a significant mental edge at least.
Yeah, I do like this. I think this game is more or less a shootout, especially since it's at the Swamp. But I just Graham Mertz, I struggle mightily to get behind. So, but yeah, it's a good pay. It's plus 200. It's good value, and again, the mental edge is going to be a huge factor. So, but we'll see. I might end up tailing that pick just to sprinkle a little bit on plus 200. But speaking of odds and getting a lot of good value, our parlays and teasers of the week. So we each pick a parlay that's got to be at least 3 legs, and we'll let you know if it's a teaser or a parlay what we're doing. I'll start with mine. I think mine's probably the most aggressive by far, but I'm calling this the Tiller towards trouble parlay. So I'm going with Penn State minus 14.5 at Illinois, Duke minus 19 versus Northwestern, and Washington minus 16 at Michigan State. All three of the famous programs for getting in trouble, but um, I like all these favorites. I wasn't positive what I wanted to do in terms of locks or why I wanted to go with this, but it's plus 595 for all three of these. If you make I think the late game is Duke. If you make Duke money line, I think it drops down to like plus 297. Still really good value. But I do love Penn State. I think they're going to put a lot of points on the board. I already have their over as my lock. Like I said, Michael Penix might be able to go off, and Riley Leonard, I don't see him having any sort of problem with Northwestern. I think all three of these quarterbacks show out. So plus 595. I think we got great value, and the big boys Tiller towards trouble parlays is my pick of the week. What do you got, Matt?
I am sticking with the system that's worked for me in the first 2 weeks, which is kind of just taking 3 or 4 favorites that are relatively big favorites and letting them rock. So we're 2-0 on parlays. We're going back to that well. Tulane money line at Southern Miss, Eastern Michigan money line at UMass, UConn money line versus FIU, and UNC money line versus Minnesota. Tulane we talked about earlier. I think one of you had their spreads as your favorite pick, so that's one there. That UMass and FIU, I'm just betting against 2 of the worst teams in the country. UMass is awful, FIU's awful. UConn and EMU should be able to take care of business there. And then I don't buy it with this Minnesota team. They were getting a little hype coming into this year, and then obviously they barely won in week 1. I don't see the hype with that team. I think UNC is a substantially better football team. That comes in at around, depending on what your book's at, plus 190 to 195. So it's a little smaller than last year. The first 2 weeks, I think both mine are on plus 300. So it's a little safer of a parlay, but it is still plus money.
Still good value. I kind of agree with you with Minnesota. And I think they're one of the maybe it's just because it's a slow week 3, but I think they're one of the darlings for upsets this week that a lot of shows are starting to pick and dive into. People are buying into like Fleck Bucks or whatever, but I don't know how I feel about that. But also, I'm pretty sure the UConn FIU game is one of the ugliest looking games I've seen. I think the over under is like 45, and every signal is telling everyone to hammer the under. So, what do you got, Mike? What's your parlay or teaser of the week?
All right, I am not rowing the boat, just so you know, Matt. That's I don't think Minnesota has a shot to win. I think they can cover. When I thought it was like plus 8.5 or something like that, I think they could backdoor cover based on UNC having a double overtime game last week, but no shot at winning. I bought a couple points in a couple Big Ten games. So I got UMD Maryland minus 10 versus Virginia. Virginia's a really nice story. Obviously with the tragedy they had last year, but they're a bad football team. Maryland let Charlotte hang around last week. I think that scared some of their guys straight. I saw in your magazine someone picked them to win 9 or 10 games or something like that. I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if I see that," but they're definitely not a bad football team. So I think they'll win easily by 10. I think Penn State's going to win by more than 10. So I got 10 for Maryland, 10 for Penn State, and then I got LSU money line. I don't think that they're going to cover that 10 points, but I do think they're going to squeak out with a win. Otherwise, Brian Kelly's seat's going to start getting pretty darn warm as well. So my 2 upset or parlay are heavily leaning on coaches avoiding the hot seat.
Yeah, coaches avoid the hot seat and obviously living your Big Ten teams over there. But I
By the way,
do like
that'll
that
get
too.
that'll get you plus 201. So just over double your money, buying a couple points and then the LSU money line.
Nice. No, I like that. I do like the idea of buying some points. I haven't even factored that in when I'm starting to build these. I tend to just build them, take a look at what I see, clear the whole, clear the whole board, build it again, take a look at what I see, clear the board. I think I did that 10 times, trying to do this week's, but yeah. So we'll go around the room, additional picks that we want to throw out, thoughts on other games we didn't necessarily cover um go over. I'll start and throw a couple out there. I like Northern Illinois with plus 10.5 at Nebraska. I just don't think Nebraska's a really good football team. I think it's gonna be a super low scoring game. I already talked about this in my parlay, but I do love Duke minus 19 at Northwestern or versus Northwestern. Excuse me, it's at home. And then I almost picked this as my lock of the week or one of my or my favorite, but Oregon State minus 24.5. I know that's a huge number against San Diego State, but they have been an absolute wagon. I'm still really struggling to buy into DJ Uiagalelei, but I mean they've looked fantastic and they're just a bully of a football team. I think they've won by like 45 or 50 points both of their first two games. I don't see San Diego State keeping up with them. And then Tennessee, Florida, I the under 58.5. I think I'm taking a look at. I think that's it does smell like an upset with Florida at home, and I think there's going to be a lot of mistakes with Joe Milton and Graham Mertz. So under 58 is I think a pretty good under 58.5. Excuse me, I think it's a pretty good pick. But what do you like, Mike? What other games you got your eye on?
I got Matt's upset and JMU money line. I think I don't know how that's not a pick'em game at best. James Madison's good. They're a good football team out of the Sun Belt. And I do have Minnesota plus 7.5 at UNC. I think there's going to be some hangover from the App State battle. Minnesota's defense is pretty good, but I don't. They're not winners. I don't again. I don't think that they're going to win this game, but I do think they're going to cover.
Yeah, they got to learn how to win this.
Yeah.
I don't have much else this week. It's a pretty ugly slate. I looked at Tennessee, Florida's total. I thought maybe if that's at like 54.5, I would have taken the over. That's what I was thinking it would be, but 58.5, I think it's gonna be points. Memphis minus 14.5 against Navy. I think Navy's a really bad football team. They got blown out in week 0 by Notre Dame, and Memphis they're not great, but they are 2-0. So I think maybe they can cover 14.5 there, but other than that, I'm just not looking at much this week. This is gonna be a week I play pretty light.
Yeah, I was telling you guys before the show, I'm actually moving apartments this weekend, so I couldn't have timed it better. This ugly game, I'll just put it on the background to move some stuff around, but mostly follow my picks on my phone. But yeah, a little bit of an ugly week, but yeah, that's all our picks. We got our 5 picks. We'll put out the graphic probably Friday afternoon for everyone to take a look at, follow along. You can fade us, you can follow us, whatever you want to do. So far, our records are not the best, but it's still early for everyone. It's week 1 and 2 for everyone. So hoping to turn it around this week before we get into some of our bigger games and conference play. But yeah, that's it from us. And thank you for watching. Follow and subscribe, and obviously follow all of our content coming out on T Portal CFB at Twitter and the transferportal.com, our website. We'll see you next week.